slump after I finished those books because, like I said, once I got into them, that was like genuinely my world while I was reading them, and it is without a doubt my favorite Sarah J. Maas series. Like, even though I read ACOTAR first, it is my favorite Sarah J. Maas series, and yeah, so that was the beginning of the year. I have The Foxglove King by Hannah Witten on here, and I didn't go into too much detail about those books because I feel like everybody and their mom knows about Sarah J. Maas and Throne of Glass. But the next book I actually DNF'd, and this was a book that we picked for my book club, and I was listening to it on audiobook, and I don't know if it was because it was the first book that I read after Throne of Glass, but like I couldn't get into it, and it was also a fantasy, and I don't know, I just don't think I was immersed. I wasn't immersed in the plot or with the characters, and I DNF'd it, and yeah, so then the next book that I read, the next book was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. One Dark Window. Now, this was actually a duology. It is a completed duology, and I actually picked this one for my book club, and I really liked it. It is about, let me see if I can go to the book details on my iPad. It's called The Shepherd King Duology. I'll just read you the bio for this one. Elspeth needs a monster. The monster might be her. Elspeth Spindle needs more than luck to stay safe in the eerie, mist-locked kingdom of Blunder. She needs a monster. She calls him the Nightmare, an ancient mercurial spirit trapped in her head. He protects her, he keeps her secrets, but nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, her life takes a drastic turn. Thrust into a world of shadow and deception, she joins a dangerous quest to cure Blunder from the dark magic infecting it. And the highwayman, he just so happens to be the king's nephew, captain of the most dangerous men in Blunder, and guilty of high treason. Together they must gather 12 Providence cards, the keys to the cure. But as the stakes heighten and their undeniable attraction intensifies, Elspeth is forced to face her darkest secret yet. The Nightmare is slowly taking over her mind, and she might not be able to stop him. So I really enjoyed that one. I thought that it was good world building. I liked the magic system with the Providence cards, and then the dilemma of having this, like, she calls him the Nightmare in her mind, and then the enemies to lovers aspect in there. I really enjoyed that one. And then next, because I did not read the sequel back to back for whatever reason, I read Rootbound her estranged family's home, Logan Range, a now famous ranch functioning as the setting for a popular TV show. She's left with no choice but to agree. Okay, that's a really long book description. But basically, she is estranged from her father and lived with her mother and her sister growing up, and got her mother's very one-sided perspective on why they weren't with the father anymore. And after her divorce, she goes to her dad's family ranch, meets a cowboy there, and is there like on contract as a photographer, and the story unfolds from there. And I thought that it was very well done because you get the dynamics of the building romance between her and Henry, and then the dynamics between her and the family she didn't really get to have growing up, and her grappling with who she is post-divorce, what her life was like growing up, why it was like that, and like who she is now, all with this budding romance happening. So I really liked that one. And after that one, I read Happy Place by Emily Henry. Happy Place. Happy Place by Emily Henry. And obviously, if you have been on my channel before when I've talked about books, you know that Emily Henry is who I would say is probably my favorite romance author. I love her books. Okay, sorry for the chaos that this video is so far. There's been a lot of distractions, so I keep having to stop. But I'm going to try to finish. I think what I was saying was that my next read was Happy Place by Emily Henry. Now actually have a physical copy of the next book as well. And that is Two Twisted Crowns. Two Twisted Crowns. Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. Now this is the sequel to One Dark Window. One Dark Window that I read earlier in the year for my book club, and I did read the back of that one. I'm not going to read the back of this one because it is a sequel, and I don't want to unintentionally give anything away from the first book. But I think the covers are very eerie, and they suit the story well. This one does follow two characters from the first book a little more closely than the original two characters, but I'm okay with that because I liked their story too. 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 Two Twisted Crowns. And I thought that book wrapped up the duology really well, and I enjoyed reading both of those books, and I was really hoping that they would get me back into fantasy more long term, because fantasy is my normal genre, and for some reason I've had the hardest time, like outside of reading Throne of Glass, really just getting back into fantasy and becoming absorbed. And those books were really good, and I read them because of book club, but I didn't want to read fantasy after I read them, which was a little disappointing. But it is what it is. I'm a mood reader, and I go where the mood takes me. So after that, I ended up reading Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. Now, I have not read any other Carly Fortune books before, and I know that this is not her first one. I don't remember what the first one is called. I think the cover is blue with like red letters. But I didn't read that one. I read Meet Me at the Lake because this one was available at the library and the other one was not. And I wasn't sure what to expect just because I had not read her before. And I've heard mixed things, mostly good, but I've heard mixed things about the author. I think back when her first book came out, I heard a lot of people say that it was like a ripoff of one of Christina Lauren's books. I am not saying that I feel that way. I have not read it, so I have no opinion on the matter. But I have read the Christina Lauren book that it is compared to frequently. So I am curious to read it now that I've read Meet Me at the Lake by Carly, because doesn't look at all how she once imagined it would. Instead of living in the city, Fern's back home, running her mother's Muskoka Lakeside Resort, something she vowed she would never do. The place is in disarray. Her ex-boyfriend's the manager, and Fern doesn't know where to begin. She needs a plan, a lifeline. To her surprise, it comes in the form of Will, who arrives 9 years too late. Too late, too late, too late, too late, with a suitcase in tow and an offer to help on his lips. Will may be the only person who understands what Fern is going through. But how could she possibly trust this expensive suit-wearing mirage who seems nothing like the young man she met all those years ago? Will is hiding something, and Fern's not sure she wants to know what it is. But 10 years ago, Will Baxter rescued Fern. Can she do the same for him? Anyway, I really, really enjoyed that one. And it was a great start to my summer reading. The next one that I read was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This was actually a book club pick. A book club pick. And I loved it. It was my second Christina Lauren. I had already read In the Holidays, which I talked about in my favorite holiday books video. But The Paradise Problem was also a great summer read. Some of the characters were a bit infuriating, but they were not, it was not the female main character or the male main character, it was the male main character's family. They were a little difficult to endure, but the story was so good. I think the premise, I'm not going to read the background for this one, but the two main characters basically had a marriage of convenience in college for the sake of housing, like on the college campus. She's like a struggling artist and she doesn't really know anything about him. They're connected through friends and they're only marrying so that they can access like specific housing in college that only married couples can access, and then they're just gonna get divorced and move on with their lives. Long story short, they're not divorced yet because for him to access his trust, like they have to be married like a certain amount of time. He's having a wedding in the family. I think his sister's getting married, and he needs Anna to come and convincingly be his wife in front of his family. And I don't remember all of the details, but like his family's super loaded. He's like an heir to some like grocery store chain. So they fly to some island off the coast of Indonesia, I think, and it's, you know, like they're staying in one of those fancy huts that's like on stilts over the water. But his relationship with his family is super complicated, and they've never been in a real relationship was pleasantly surprised when I liked it. Is it Sarah J. Maas level for me? No, it is not Sarah J. Maas level